Hello everyone, my name is Madison and welcome back to Hopp'in, and today I'll be teaching you 10 things that you should avoid at reptile fairs. Now this video is going to go over all the general information you should know before you attend your first reptile fair. Now I will say that when I was a beginner and like a preteen, I wish I knew these things because I could have avoided a lot of mistakes and a lot of wasting money and time. So the number one thing in my book personally is do not bring your pet to the reptile fair. You would be surprised how normal this is in some certain local fairs. It's really not a good idea. Not every reptile fair has amazing ethical breeders that have just pristine health animals. You don't know what's going on in all of it. Like, there's so many reptiles in an enclosed space. Don't take your reptile in and just introduce it to this petri dish worth of illnesses and mites, etc. It's also loud. There's bright lights. There's tons of people. I've been to so many that are just crammed with people. Like, the small local ones are always going to be jam-packed with people. You have no idea how many reptile people are in your community until there's a small local fair in your area. And then it's just a long period without heat and humidity. I mean, if you're going to a reptile fair and you own reptiles, you're going to want to see everything. Just don't bring your pets. It's just not a good idea. Number 2, be educated and ready for your new pet. As everybody should know, you have to do heavy research before you adopt an animal, especially something like a reptile or an amphibian. You can't just pick them up like a puppy, even though you shouldn't just pick up a puppy either. It's not necessarily common knowledge. Like, if you have a leopard gecko, you can't just go buy a chameleon. It's good to, have some reptile experience before you get some of these crazier reptiles. But you gotta know what you're getting yourself into, because you might see, oh, this chameleon is so cheap here, because reptile fairs tend to be a little bit cheaper. You buy a chameleon for 40 bucks, and then you realize that you have to buy $400 worth of setup for the chameleon that should already be set up before you get the chameleon, etc. Do research, know what you're getting, and be ready to get whatever you want. Now, to go along with research, number 3 is ask questions to the vendors and breeders. Do not just assume they are great people. Not saying everyone's a bad person, but not everybody's a great person, and you shouldn't assume that they have pristine health animals and they're doing everything in their best interest and aren't just money hungry. Number 1 question to ask, is your animal wild caught? If they say yes, thank you for your time, walk away. You don't want to support somebody who, has wild caught animals. 2, they're going to be full of parasites and unknown illnesses, and it's just not a good idea. And then the second question I always ask is, where do you breed your animals? Because if they say, oh, they're not wild caught, and then they can't answer where they're bred, they're wild caught. So that's my follow-up question, because it's obviously they can quickly lie. They're trying to make money. I get it, you have to make money, but these are live animals we're talking about. These are souls. So I follow up with where do you breed your animals? For example, Josh's Frogs is located in Michigan. I actually got to go to their facility, so they're a perfect example of being super transparent and like, hey, this is where we breed our animals, this is where they live, etc. Awesome stuff. We love to see transparency because you really know what's going on. So, you kind of get past the if they're actually captive or if they're actually captive bred, and then where they are raised. Obviously not everybody's going to have a full YouTube channel, but if they can, blurt out, oh, I have this here and here, that's a good sign. Then this depends on what animals you're looking at, but I would follow up if you're looking for something like a ball python or a leopard gecko. Do you know their genes? A good breeder should know what genetics they're breeding. It's extremely important in preventing so many, issues and genetic deformities, etc. If they can't list the genes of their snakes, that's concerning. A big thing to avoid with ball pythons is the spider morph. It causes a whole bunch of health conditions. You can view a link down in the description that goes more in depth into that. And then something to avoid with leopard geckos is white and yellow, lemon frost, super snow, max snow, blizzard, and more. There's a link in the description explaining why all of these are bad. Basically, they just cause neurological issues that make quality of life not good for an animal. So you don't want to support somebody who's doing this, and you most certainly don't want to purchase one of these animals from them because it's only feeding into their business. Obviously, there's exceptions with rescues, but I'm just saying if you're going in for a pet, don't support somebody who's unethical and causing these just horrible things to go on in the community. You know, it's animal abuse. It really is. So you just don't want to support somebody like that. Number 4, avoid injured animals. It's kind of self-explanatory, but I have seen so many frogs, particularly white tree frogs, with just horrible cuts and nose rubbing and scratches and bite marks all over them, like all over them. And it scares me because when you go to a reptile fair as a vendor and a breeder, you want to bring your best, healthiest animals. So if that's their best and healthiest and something they're not ashamed of, concerning. It just kind of reflects how the breeder feels about the animals and the living condition the animals have been in and etc. They're probably wild caught and got shoved into these tiny enclosures, so they're freaking out. Or if they were actually bred with them, they were bred in horrible conditions and have been kept in places that they want to get out of. That's what the nose rubbing is. And then, bites and cuts, etc. I'm assuming they're probably fighting over food in a small space. You would be surprised just how many animals at these fairs have cuts and wounds on them. And when you say something, the people are always like, oh, it must have been in shipping. But they can't get nose rubbing. Like, to the extent I've seen, like bleeding, they can't get it that quickly. Another thing I've noticed is if all the crested geckos have no tail. And I'm talking all of them, because sometimes people have 100 crested geckos. And if every single one of them doesn't have a tail, that's a red flag in my book. Obviously, crested geckos can drop their tail. They're known to drop their tail kind of quickly. But I met this breeder at Repticon Kissimmee, and her crested geckos, every single one of them, from baby to, retired breeder, all had their tails. And I looked, and I was like, you know what? I've been to so many reptile fairs, and I've never, ever seen an entire crested gecko booth with all of them having their tails. And she was like, I really take pride in my animals. And she showed me these, extra large, extra tall, extra wide exoteras with these beautiful natural setups. And she was like, I want them to have a quality of life. And then, I make a little bit of money off of their offspring, and I can just keep bettering, the genes in their life and everything. It was amazing. Like, they're out there. They exist. People who really care about these animals are out there. So that's why it's good to just look. Like, I noticed it right away. I just, looked at her table. They all had tails. And I got her business card because if I ever want a crested gecko, I'm going to her because she showed me. She was, transparent about where the animals were bred. And it's obvious she takes good care of them because of that visual, reminder. Number 5. Avoid noticeable setup issues. Now, it's important to keep in mind, if this is your first time going to a reptile fair, first time ever experiencing any of the reptile community, the enclosures at a reptile fair are temporary. These animals are not kept in deli cups regularly, or at least they shouldn't be if you're, looking at good vendors. It's not animal abuse unless they have the nose rubbing and cuts like I just explained, but these enclosures are temporary. They're supposed to put the animal on display. You're supposed to be able to see them because they're supposed to be adopted that day. And the events are only, 1 day or 2 days, and then that's it. However, I did see a man with an entire table of bearded dragons, all on walnut shells. Now, if you're new to the reptile community, or new to me in general and haven't seen my TikToks, walnut shells are good for nothing. Not a single thing in the reptile and amphibian community. There isn't a single reptile or amphibian, excuse the loud Florida cars. There isn't a single reptile or amphibian, hold on. There isn't a single reptile or amphibian that can do well on walnut shells. You'd think, oh, but it's a natural, substrate. It should just digest in the stomach. No. It causes cuts. It causes skin irritation. It causes impactions. It causes so many bad things. So I see this man who has all of these bearded dragons on walnut shells. I'm like, okay, already, no thank you. And I noticed some of his animals had, they were stargazing and wobbling, and yeah. Not a good breeder, but I noticed right away because of his poor setup that his animals weren't going to be good. So if you see walnut shells, just no, they're bad. And don't argue with me about specifically reptiles and amphibians. None of them can be on that. Not a single one. I stand by that. There's not many things that I'm 1 billion% on, but walnut shells are not good for reptiles and amphibians. And number 6, avoid purchasing damaged product. Now, I love going to reptile fairs to get supplies, particularly driftwood. It's a great place to measure the driftwood and actually handle it and see it before you purchase it. So even if that's the only thing you want, I would totally suggest going to a reptile fair just for driftwood. However, in recent years, I have noticed a lot of people repackaging product, but in name brand like packaging. I noticed somebody, I believe it was in 2019, was selling their own calcium formula in the Zoom Ed containers. The only thing was a little label on top with so-and-so's calcium with these ingredients and these benefits. Not saying their calcium was bad, but if somebody has to put it in a different company's like packaging to sell it, that concerns me. If I want Zoom Ed calcium, I'm gonna buy Zoom Ed calcium. I personally suggest, this is a personal take, not like a set in stone rule, I don't buy any sort of supplement for my animal at these fairs just because I like to get it when it still has the plastic coating on it and it's straight from the source. But if you do want to get something like cricket cubes or something, make sure that it still has the seal on the top if it's a product that comes with something like that it doesn't look tampered with, dirty. I've noticed items that just look like they have grease all over them. And you don't want these foreign items anywhere near your reptiles, let alone in something that they need to exist, like, dechlorinator or calcium and whatnot. So don't take it completely out of your head to purchase any sort of supplies from reptile fairs. There just happens to be some bad vendors that have to make everybody cautious, but a great place to get driftwood and light bulbs for cheaper and Exoterra enclosures is going to be reptile fairs. Just be careful, just make sure everything's fine, because I know some fairs have like Zoom Ed and Exoterra sponsoring it, but a lot of them don't, and it's just second or third party sellers. Number 7, this is an important one. Know your local and state laws. Do not come to a fair uneducated when you're looking to get some sort of crazy reptile or amphibian. Most of the big like top tier fairs regulate these. They have their vendors go through, just knowing these things and making sure they don't sell them, but there's always loopholes, and particularly I've noticed at local fairs they don't necessarily follow these regulations and policies, and it can get you in a lot of trouble if you're caught owning these reptiles without the proper license or you're in a state that they're not legal in. I know in Florida, to own a venomous snake or HOTS, you need to have a license through the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. So I could just go into a reptile fair and buy a venomous snake if they don't ask to see my license. Like, I could just do that. But if I get caught with this venomous snake, it's not good. And also, it's a venomous snake. If I don't know how to take care of it, I should not have it. So it's important. Don't go uninformed. You really need to know, particularly with reptiles and amphibians, especially if you live in a state like Florida where they can be invasive if they get out and you shouldn't have them in the first place. It's just important to know. It's actually very, very important to know for you and legalness and, the environment. And number 8, do not bring only your credit card. You need to have cash on hand. I typically take about $100 to $200 with me, because then if I don't use it, I just deposit it back. A little side note, I guess, a lot of vendors aren't going to charge you tax if you just pay with cash, because then they don't have to pay tax on it. You're this government. So I got crickets for because I buy large amounts of product at once, and it was $15 cheaper because I didn't have to pay all this tax on all the stuff I just bought. And they tend to also give deals, because then they don't get money, if they go through PayPal or Square, there's no chunk taken out of it. They get that cash, so they'll lower the price a little bit. So take cash. It's really a great thing. It's better for the vendors, better for you, and a lot of places only take cash. And number 9, this is kind of a personal thing, but I feel like a lot of people that are veterans in the reptile community would agree with me, is don't make any purchases on your first trip around the fair. There is so much to see, it can be very overwhelming, and obviously if you're going there for a specific species, you happen to see it right in the beginning, you ask the guy all the questions I was just talking about, it meets all the criterias, of course, adopt them then. But if you're just going to look and you just have a general idea, oh, I'm looking to get a sort of a Pac-Man or a pixie frog tonight, just walk around once, because you might think you see the perfect Pac-Man frog and you're like, oh, they're a little iffy on, the frog doesn't look super healthy, but it's the Pac-Man frog I want, maybe on the half part of the circle you might find somebody over here who actually knows what they're doing and taking care of the animal, etc., and you get a better deal, whatnot. So what I suggest doing, and what I do at all fairs, is when I get in, I go straight to the back and go counterclockwise, because trying to go against the current doesn't always work. So go counterclockwise, just be a courteous person. But everybody always goes right up front, because a lot of people are new and they're like, oh my god, look at all those animals and whatever. But you can like not have a massive line, and then as people start to just disperse out, you can start to go around to the front and see what's up there. One thing though that I have noticed only at local fairs and not the massive reptile fairs is crickets run out quickly, because they tend to be put right up front because a lot of people are coming for them. So if in your head you're like, I need this many, like, you know, I typically get about 3,000 1/4 crickets. I might get those right away. I might just stick in line, get them, and then I have them. I don't like carrying around that many crickets in one of my grocery bags, but you can wash a reusable bag, I guess. They're kind of gross, but I need them. So that's something I'd keep an eye on if you're going to a local small fair. They might run out of crickets quickly. However, you're just going to look, go straight to the back, and start walking. It's so much easier. And number 10, the last thing that it would like pain me if somebody didn't do this that was in my like group going, wash your hands afterwards. It doesn't matter if you didn't touch any animals. You're still in an area full of feeder mice and snake poop and probably mites and probably fleas and cricket poop again because it's so gross. Like, wash your hands. Just wash your hands, particularly if you're going home to your reptiles. Shower, change your clothes. I'm not saying these fairs are like places that you're gonna get all these illnesses and bites all over you, but it's possible. I know a lot of fairs that I've went to that are like local ones. I've walked through a field where I get flea bites on me. Also from Ohio though, so that might not be as common in other places, but like, just wash your hands. You don't know what's there. You don't know what you're touching. I like to do hand sanitizer as I'm walking out, and then we go and find like a McDonald's and we go and wash our hands in that restroom, because the restroom at the reptile fair is also going to be contaminated with whatever else people were touching there, if you know what I mean. So again, I'm not trying to scare you if you want to go to these reptile fairs. They're great, they're amazing. I go to them all the time. I love them. Just be clean and smart afterwards, because like things like coccidia spread very quickly and you don't want to bring that home to your reptile. But I hope these things helped you out. I really do suggest going to reptile fairs. My favorite things about them are getting bulk crickets and a whole bunch of feeders my animals have never tried before, and things like hornworms for way cheaper than you'll get in a pet store, and then getting supplies for my enclosures, substrates, tons of different types of driftwood and the particular pieces. Like, you know, when you're making a bioactive tank and you just need that right piece, you'll probably find that at a reptile fair. And then, of course, I love viewing the animals. I love seeing healthy, you know, strong, beautiful animals I've never seen before. And of course, when I'm going there to find a rescue or a new pet, it's a great place to look. I really love supporting local, you know, ethical breeders, and it's the place you're gonna find them. So I really do suggest it. And if you're new to the community, thank you for watching this video and educating yourself a little bit before you go ahead and go to these fairs. Have fun, they're amazing. I hope you love the reptile community. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. You know what to do. Leave a like and subscribe for more, and have a happy day. Goodbye.